Joining me now, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, I just got to ask, I mean, do you think questioning the Fed chair's excessive spending is a threat to the independence of the Federal Reserve?
I think that transparency is something that safeguards the independence of the Fed. I won't comment on like current law enforcement cases, but I could say that the Fed needs to be very transparent at all times, and it needs to be independent. We know that when Federal Reserves lose their independence, that inflation gets out of control and it hurts ordinary folks. We can't ever let that happen. I think that President Trump's view is that he's got policy disagreements with Jay Powell. He thinks that at times it's looked like their decisions have been partisan, like cutting rates right before the election, potentially to help Kamala Harris.
Right.
And he wants an independent Fed, and that's what he's emphasizing with everybody that he's interviewing for this job. And I got to say, there's a bunch of great candidates. He's really doing a good job having a thorough search.
I did read where you also said there are certain policy decisions that Powell made that you would not have made as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the bottom line is that policy decisions are made, in a difficult situation sometimes. That there's the cloud of war. But if you look at the fact that the Fed has sort of promised to hike rates ahead of President Trump's first election, but then they never did. And then the minute that he was elected, they hiked rates. All that kind of stuff, I think has been observed by the president.
Right.
And he just wonders, have they lost their way? And I can tell you that whoever the president picks, he's got a bunch of really great experienced candidates that the Fed's going to be independent again.
Kevin, not only does President Trump wonder if the Fed's lost their way, so does the American public. You talk about independence. Sure. Well, confidence in the Fed to do the right thing has plummeted from 74%. I think if they update this with the next time, it'd probably be an all-time low. So at what point should the Fed itself take a look, be introspective? I got to be quite frank with you. I've never heard a mea culpa from any Fed official, particularly a chair.
Right. I got to say that if you remember when I was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors here in the first term, that, we would talk. And I would say, well, I said this thing, but it turns out I was wrong about that. Here's this thing that came a different way than I expected, but now I understand why I got it wrong. And we would have conversations like that. I would even on Twitter post corrections when I said, hey, we thought this was the number, but actually our staff did a miscalculation. This is the actual number. And so I think that the Fed doesn't say where their models come from, doesn't say if they make a mistake, why they made a mistake, and why we should have confidence that they won't make the same mistake again. And I think that that's the thing that's got to change in today's day and age. It's very, very easy to be transparent and truthful, to put your model and your data on the table and admit when you're wrong.
Sure.
And I think that's what everybody, especially the president, expects right now.
Listen, humility is one of the things everyone agrees that that one of your great characteristics. On the flip side of that may be the idea that as chair, would you be strong enough to control, I would say strong arm, but control other members who may not actually see eye to eye with you?
I'm not going to speculate about exactly what I'm going to do if I do or I don't get the job. The president's going to decide that, and if he does choose me, I've already told him that I would accept.
But a big part of the job is swaying the committee.
But I can say I'm tough enough. I am tough enough to win an argument, and I think anybody who's come to this White House and taken every question you could get for 5 years, which is what I've done, is tough enough to go into a hostile room and help people understand why they're right or they're wrong.
Jay Powell and the Fed probably would say or feel like it's time for them to take a victory lap on a soft landing. But I did read somewhere recently where you say the economy is not booming because of the Fed. So why is the economy booming right now?
Right. Well, the economy is booming. It's really astonishing, right? So if you look at the last 3 quarters, it's 4% growth, and now we're looking at something like 5% growth. And the 5% growth is 1.5% lower than the real number because of the government shutdown. And so we're seeing numbers like we saw right at the beginning of the Reagan administration, a little bit during the dot-com years. But there have been very, very few times in American economic history where things were as strong as they are. And I think that the reason is that President Trump's policies have really, really helped. So if you look at the big, beautiful bill, that we've got expensing, we've got no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. I think that the other thing that's happening is that the artificial intelligence boom is making productivity go up for firms all around the country. And you saw, like, the latest productivity numbers are showing something like 4.5% productivity gains. That 4.5 goes right into GDP, right? And so that's, I think that's where the boom comes from. I don't think it's really about the Fed, which is basically the interest rates right now at the Fed are quite a bit higher than they are in most other countries.
Let me throw another Fed hypothetical kind of thing at you if you do get the job. And if you don't, listen, we know the Fed has acquired a lot of power over the years. Now, not all of it's their fault per se. Congress keeps giving up their power. I think, in my opinion, I would love to see, and maybe this is crazy, that Congress should be in charge of inflation. This way, maybe they would stop spending, right? Because there's no accountability, and maybe the Fed should only focus on labor. The point is, though, would you be open to changing any of the mandates or the responsibilities? Because I think the Fed has far too much.
Well, I think the dual mandate has served the Fed well when a nonpartisan Fed has pushed it forward. And the bottom line is low inflation can be politically unpopular, and that's one reason why in 1913 they designed the Fed the way they did. But in 1913 when they designed the Fed, the Fed we were under a gold standard, and so the Fed was basically no one envisioned that they could do all the stuff that they're doing right now. And so I think revisiting exactly what you can do in today's world in the Fed is something that's a reform that should be viewed.
And listen, 1913, they only had inflation. 1978, Congress punted jobs, and then since then they punted everything else under the sun. I want to talk about some other sacred cows, hedge funds, big banks. I know your phone must ring off the hook every time, right? From your old Wall Street friends asking about the caps on credit cards or stopping hedge funds from buying single-family homes. Do you support these policies?
Yeah, absolutely. I support the president's policies. He's trying to make the gains from Wall Street spread to Main Street, and we're all about to go to Davos, and he's going to give a great speech about what he's going to do to get people back into their homes again. And so I think absolutely the president has done a lot of good last year, and we're going to do even more this year. And again, in his big Davos speech that we're preparing right now, he's going to have, I think, a massive, massive fix for the housing market.
Before I let you go, some breaking news out. The Wall Street's been on pins and needles about the Supreme Court and tariffs. It may be a moot point. The U.S. and Taiwan just signed a trade and investment agreement. It's absolutely phenomenal. Commerce Department saying it will drive massive reshoring of America's semiconductor business back. We see semiconductors driving everything these days. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that what's happened is that President Trump and his trade team of Jameson Greer and Secretary Bassett and Howard Lutnick have been making great deals for Americans. We've got something like $18 trillion of commitments for job-creating investments here in the U.S. And I think that more of that is going to be coming all year.
Davos, we know there's the big housing speech. What else can we anticipate?
There's also going to be some look at the new world order that President Trump is creating, and a lot of countries that were whining about tariffs 6 months ago and saying that President Trump was going to harm their economies had pretty good years. And I think it's in part because people recognize that President Trump has made it so that we are the shining city on the hill again. We are the engine of global economic growth because the U.S. is really that strong again.
Yeah, and I think he's doing it because he's coloring outside the lines, right? It's just these rigid rules that we've lived by for so long, not necessarily applicable anymore, and certainly have underserved Americans in many cases. Kevin, I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck, my friend.
It's great to be here. Oh, thanks.
See you soon.